Well, hey, welcome to United Opposition with Marshall and Scott. Today we're talking about, is government too big? Let's find out. Yeah, I don't want to get too big,
No danger of that, Scott.
Oh, what? Come on.
You got to get big like me, big in the right way.
See, we just got big. As soon as you said that, we just got big. There we are. Maybe I'm a little bit too tall though, so I'll hunch down though. Or maybe you gotta.
I lower my chair so that you can be taller in the show because I am rhetorically taller than you are. So I just give you that little visual boost so that it's a
You're the
little more even.
So you're claiming to be the intellectual giant between us.
Now, I'm not taking that. I mean, those are your words.
If you ever watched, can you believe Back to the Future? The movie Back to the Future is going to be 40 years old this year. If you ever watch Back to the Future, you realize that Michael J. Fox was like 5'4", and Christopher, I can't think of his name, who played Doc Brown.
I can't remember offhand either.
Like 6'2" or 6'3", so it's like a whole foot of difference between them. So that's why in the shots when they're together, Christopher Lloyd, that's what Christopher Lloyd's always hunching down and talking to Marty and leaning forward and talking like that. Or the director will have them walk, so one's close to the cameras, one's farther away, and then that distance allows them to have that forced perspective. So they had to do that because they were so tall. So I'll be the Christopher Lloyd, I'll be Doc Brown. Marty, I'll talk loud and I'll talk over you and be excitable, and then you can be Marty here.
There you go. One of these days we'll have to find those old pictures we took. And put those and share those with people.
I sent you that one. That's right.
I've got it somewhere.
Giant. I found it and I scanned it. I was in a photography class and we were walking around BC because we would just hang out and just talk at BC. And I said, hey, I got to do these pictures on forced perspective. And so we did that. And so you're really big in the frame and I'm really small in the frame. We took that picture. I literally had to do a timer on the back then mechanical timer on the camera.
Yeah.
Set it and then put a marker where my head was going to be and went click. And then I ran like 30 feet down there and lined up like that to be in the spot. And we had to do and again, this is actual film. Like we had to take like 5 or 6 attempts and hopefully one of them came out. I wouldn't find out till like next week when I developed the pictures and all right, that one was good enough. Old days. We're the old timers, huh? So we're talking about stuff. So let's talk about some old stuff. Let's talk about the size of government. Is government too big in the midst of all this going on with Doge and reducing the size of government and that being kind of a big talking point for conservatives of let's reduce the size of government. You mentioned something about I saw you had a Facebook post commenting about that of you're not too concerned with the size of government, but you are concerned with the efficiency of government. And that brought us to a place where before the show, we were talking about what kind of get into the question when we're talking about the size of government, I guess getting to the question, how did you put it? What's the purpose of government? Tell me a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I don't remember. I remember making the post about that, but what I'll tell you in general is my idea.
So often that you forget what you post.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I think what inspired it was somebody had posted something and it was from some libertarian about how we're taxed too much and how everything is taxed. We're paying too much taxes and nothing should be taxed, which of course is absurd.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when I think about it, like I don't mind paying high taxes. I would be thrilled to pay like half of my income, let's say, on taxes if I received that amount back in value. And I have a lot of friends who are in Europe, who are Europeans, and they pay high taxes, but they don't seem to mind it. And when I ask, well, why don't you mind paying the taxes that you pay? And it's very simple. They feel that they get value. They get Social Security. They get disability. They get employment insurance. Or we would call unemployment, things like that. They get free mass transit and other things. They see the value for their money: free school, free college, free preschool, and so on. Nobody starves. Nobody's hungry. there's a very strong and robust safety net. And I think if that strong and robust safety net existed, I wouldn't mind what I pay. The problem that I have, and I think this might be where you and I agree, is I think we feel that we pay our taxes, but when we look to see, well, what do we get for them? And it's really kind of hard to point to the value. I do think we're getting more value than we feel, but I don't think we're at all getting the full value of what we pay. So there's this general sense that, hey, I'm being cheated. And so the question then becomes, what should we do about it? And a lot of people are like, well, we need to cut taxes, we need to cut government. And for me, it's different. I think we need to reform government. We need to make it efficient, not by taking a chainsaw to it, mind you, but by taking measures to hold it accountable. And that might be starting with things like term limits, making the government more accountable to the people. Anything that makes the government accountable, I'm in favor of that. Stripping away certain privileges and perks and entitlements that people who are elected to office just take for granted, like free health care. If the American people don't get free health care, why should you? You
Yeah.
know, I would agree to give that to somebody who risks their life for our country. If you're a veteran, absolutely, but you should get platinum level care as a veteran. And while their health care is free, the wait times are long. The system is inefficient. It's very callous and careless from all accounts that I've heard. So that's not platinum level care, and that's not the care that I believe people who serve their country are entitled to receive. But I would argue that everybody should be entitled to platinum level care. How we get there, I don't know. It's another debate. But that's just overall my take on government. I don't think government is necessarily too big or can be too big if the people agree that they want government to provide a lot of goods and services, but it needs to function efficiently. Otherwise, it's just ripping you off.
And I think where you and I are going to kind of diverge, because you're like, well, you might really agree with this, and I get where you're coming from with the whole we're not getting our value for our money. You know, with your position being, if I understand your position correctly, your position being that we're putting in all this money, but we're not getting value back. You would be happy giving that much money if we were getting that much value back. And I get where you're coming from, and you would think that I would agree with you, but I don't actually agree, because fundamentally, I don't believe that we should be getting value from our government in that way. I don't see our government as the product that we should be buying and doing that. I don't feel that government should be doing all of that much. I don't feel that I don't agree with giving the government money to do things for me.
Okay, Jefferson, why don't you explain?
Well, when we asked about when the question that you sent me, you know, that when we're talking about today, the question that you sent me, this is what drove me, is let's see, you said, darn it, I don't see it on there.
I think it was just, what should the size of government be? And I had in my mind, I figured you were going to whip out Thomas Jefferson on me.
No.
Yeah, what ought the role of government be?
Yeah, what ought the role of government be? There we go.
Yeah.
And for me, what I'm coming from on that is government. The purpose of government, in my eyes, the purpose of government is to ensure, as best as possible, to protect and ensure the individual liberties of its citizens, and that should be defined as a set of negative rights that the government cannot violate. And So I don't look to the government to provide me anything. I look to the government to protect my individual rights. That is the role of government. The role of government is to protect my individual rights, not necessarily to provide me. And I definitely don't want the government to be trying to make laws that say, we're going to provide you these rights. We're going to say that you have positive rights. I don't want the government defining any positive rights. I want there to be defined only by negative rights, because any positive right that is defined by a government can be removed by a government. That they have the power to grant that right. They have the power to take that right away. I want the government to be confined to, these are rights that you cannot violate. So there's nothing that can be given and nothing that can be taken. It's simply, this is the line that you cannot cross. And so for me, government should always only be as big as it needs to be to ensure individual rights. So that means, because I believe every act of government is an infringement upon individual rights. I also know and accept that some of those things are necessary. It is necessary by definition to have a government is to accept the necessity of the government stepping on certain individual rights for the greater good. And I understand that that's a necessity. I want government to be bound as much as possible so it can do that as little as possible, so that it does as little as possible to ensure individual liberties. And so
Right.
as government gets bigger, as more bureaucracy comes, as more regulations come on, all of that is simply control over individual rights. And I want to, as much as I know that some of that has to be there, I believe I believe we as citizens should fight it as much as possible so that only the minimum amount is taken. If we
Okay,
give in,
right.
even with the idea of, well,
Yeah, I
government
get it.
takes care of me, then we're going to let government make so many more decisions for us as individuals that we're going to continuously lose individual rights. And so when I say I don't want government getting big, I'm not necessarily talking about literally the size of government. I'm talking about the power that it takes and the power that it can wield over individual liberties.
Mhm.
That should be reduced as much as possible, knowing that some of it has to happen. So let's fight it as much as possible so that it happens very, very slowly, so we don't lose as much, so we don't lose rights very quickly.
Right. So you acknowledge that some of it has to happen.
Has to happen. Yeah.
Why does some of it have to happen at all? And then when it does, where do you draw the line that, okay, that's enough of that, no more?
Well, again, that's we fight it to the extreme. We say you don't get to take any, and then the other side says we have to take some, and then we say, well, then you can
give me an example.
It would be specific. Like it would have, that's the whole thing that we're supposed to send our representatives to argue about. That's what should be happening in Washington. That's what our representatives should be doing, is saying, hey, we believe that we should do, and we should. And
well, after 250 years, here we are.
Yeah.
So my question again is, in Scott's perfect world, where would that line be from a practical perspective? Let's say you were the decider. Let's say you were the president, and Congress is debating something, or maybe you're the leader of the party, and you have to come up with some specific, or maybe you're a judge, a Supreme Court justice. You have to figure out, where's the line drawn? Where do you think the line should be? And just maybe pick a specific example.
Well, again, I would personally move very similar to what Trump is doing. Just start taking an axe to it until it's like, whoa, okay, we've gone too far. I'm the kind of person, when I want to clean my house, when I want to go clean my house, it's, you know what, it's either the trash or it's not, and we're gonna take time to clean the house. Then we're gonna clean the house. I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna, like, yes or no. Maybe not necessarily, the whole, what is it, the Japanese proverb of, hold it in your hand, and if it gives you joy, then keep it. If it doesn't, but I will be
the IRS. Does it spark joy?
Yeah.
Hold this letter in your hand from the IRS.
I would lean on the side of reducing it as much as possible, especially taking out most of the mid-level positions. The mid-level bureaucracy is where the inefficiency and corruption comes from. It's not the workers that are sitting down at when you come into the government office and the people you deal with there. It's not those workers, and it's not necessarily the people on the top who are making these broad decisions. I understand that people who are in those positions need to make some fairly broad decisions that have to be carried out by the people who are, who are boots on the ground, that are running those things. It's the multiple levels of bureaucracy, creating these multiple levels of bureaucratic paperwork and red tape and things, and funneling off and creating the red tape in ways that funnel off funds to support their either them personally or the things that they want. All those middle layers, I would start in those middle layers and just say, let's get rid of as many managers as possible. Let's get rid of as many higher up bureaucracy managers as possible, doing the same thing with regulations. What are all these detailed regulations, all these things that, what is this? Why is this particular regulation here? That regulation there? I mean, again,
Scott, is it safe to say that you cannot give me any specifics?
Well, again, we would have to get into specifics as far as like
Yes.
so many different things. That's why you would have a
Just
team of people looking
one.
over these things.
Pick one.
Yeah, sure. How about the what is it? The government cheese one? How about the or what's the other one? We wanted to like there's certain size vehicles that we cannot purchase that Europe has. Small pickup trucks or vans that have certain number of seats, because back in the 60s there was the some sort of food, what was it, they wanted to sell more chickens to Europe, and so they increased some weird thing that increased the price of chickens to Europe because they wanted to send more. So Europe responded by saying, well, you can't have this many cars or they're this size. So the United States made it. At the same time, there was this, it was so weird. It's this weird thing. I remember watching a YouTube video on it that was like, all the reason you cannot buy this size car here was because in the 1950s, they wanted to sell more chickens to Europe. And Europe responded. Yeah, Europe responded. And so then there was this law of, Europe was going to send certain cars. And so the car makers were like, well, we can't compete with those areas. So they wrote a law in a regulation as part of the FDA or whatever it is about the size of vehicles and cars coming in. And so now you can't, it's like somebody go in there and cut that ridiculousness out. It was a regulation put into a law 5-6 decades ago that was still affecting us now, just so that constituent who wanted to, the automotive companies, petitioned and lobbied their congressman to add that into that bill. Those are the types of things. Somebody needs to go through those things, and those things are ridiculous. Go through those details and say, how did this get here? That's why it literally has to be one thing at a time. I just pulling one thing random out. You're like, just say one specific thing. We would need to bring up a specific thing, research it, look at it. Somebody go in there and say, okay, why was this decision made? Really? This is what it is? I mean, you give the example. There's two examples that when I'm preaching, we give those examples. One of them is the wife gets the ham, right? The holiday ham, and cuts off the two ends of the ham and puts it in the oven to cook it. And the husband's like, why do you do that? And she's like, I don't know. That's the way my mom taught me. The holidays. Why do you cut off the ham? It's like, I don't know. That's the way your grandmother taught me. We asked the grandma, finally asked the grandma, why do you cut it off? She says, oh, when we were first married, our oven was only this big. We only had pans this big. So we had to cut the ends off for it to fit. It's like, and so three generations later, they're still cutting the ends off the ham and putting it in there because they think that's just the way it is. Somebody needs to go into every single thing and look back through the history and say, that's a ridiculous reason that doesn't exist anymore. Cut it.
This is way different than the Trump with a hatchet or a bull in a china closet type approach.
That's what they're doing.
I
feel like that is what they're doing.
I don't know about that.
There's a whole team of people going into each thing and doing that.
Yeah, firing all the nuclear engineers and then scrambling to hire them back.
We'll hire back the right one. Hire back the right position. Maybe change. Maybe you do need to eliminate all of those layers because you can't just get this person and put them here. Let's eliminate all those layers and hire a person for this new position and do it here. That makes sense.
I'm not going to argue with making reasonable cuts. I agree with you that over time inefficiencies come into systems. Whenever there's a little issue with the system, think of a mechanical system. There's always somebody who's quick to add gears or lubrication or an additional, conveyor or whatever it may be to a system to get the system to conform to the present required functionality. But then the end result is that system becomes increasingly complex. And over time, it becomes so complex and requires so much maintenance that it is no longer efficient and will even sometimes grind to a halt, stop working. And then you have to completely discard it and rebuild it. And that happens periodically. And I'm okay with that. But there's a difference between that and, again, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And right now, I think we're throwing out a lot of babies. Brett Bailey.
We're throwing out somebody's. We're throwing out somebody's. Some bureaucrat's baby. But I have no problem. Throwing. But that's my constituency. I have no problem throwing that out.
Okay. Brett Bailey makes an argument. He says, get rid of government subsidies to oil and pharmaceuticals.
Sure.
And yeah, sure. I think a lot of us agree. Get rid of these subsidies to billion-dollar corporations. Absolutely no problem. The quote from Jefferson is govern the government is best which governs least. And it sounds like a fantastic quote, and a lot of libertarians really like it. But the problem that I have with this whole constitutional approach and the whole negative right approach or whatever uh, is that we've had 250 years of human history and development take place.
Mhm.
The world today is nothing like the world, and I think I
But
need to
humans
be a
are
little bit
exactly the
careful.
same.
It's not nothing like, but it's very different from the world of 250 years ago. For example, we've had an entire scientific revolution, we've had a computer revolution, a nuclear revolution. All of these things have transpired since. We've
Mhm.
developed germ theory, and we no longer have a frontier where a person can just go out and hack their living out of a wilderness. We have women that can vote. We no longer have slavery. We have modern day machinery and other things that can automate and do many jobs and so on. So there's all of these changes that have happened in society, and the world is globalized and highly interconnected. So
But
the fact that we live in a society, we don't live in a community. During the time of Jefferson, people lived in small, tiny, close knit communities where people drew their water from a communal well, and that was just fine. And the big
not
problems
in
such
big
as
cities.
mass urbanization
Yeah,
and
not in big cities, it wasn't like that.
I'm sorry, what?
Not in the big cities, it wasn't like that.
Okay, but in the 13 colonies, we had very few big cities, and even the big cities weren't that big.
Mhm.
And even in the cities that we did have, cities like New York and Philadelphia, there were problems that emerged, especially in the 19th century. Things like water pollution and so on, things that did affect the community as a whole, that required government intervention to clean it up. But now we have these things on a national scale. We really do need a government. We have things like interstate commerce. And because commerce and everything flows so quickly, it's no longer a horse drawn cart and carriage. It
Mhm.
is now this whole thing, where transactions occur at the speed of light. So I think we do need a government to step up and do things. For example, things like healthcare. 250 years ago, healthcare was, drink this tea, or here's something
Mhm.
that the local apothecary put together for you. Now, of course, we have modern science and medicine, and the diseases that I catch can be spread to you. However, we now know how to prevent that, and we know how to resist those illnesses, and so on. And I think it is incumbent upon us as a society, provided we agree in the majority, which we have done, to say that we wish to establish this as a right. And we can establish things as rights, as positive rights, such as the right
Dangerous.
to vote,
That is
such
so
as the right
dangerous.
to vote.
No,
I
vote
understand.
vote is a
Well,
negative right.
well, okay. But at the end of the day, I think that because we live in a complicated, interconnected society, where a person cannot simply go out on their own to the frontier and hack their living out of the wilderness. We need to establish we need a new attitude towards government. One that, for example, takes care of people if they can't
Mm,
find work,
no, because
things like that.
humanity hasn't changed. Technology has changed, but humanity hasn't changed.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
and so government needs to stay with humanity. The faults of humanity, the greed and corruption of humanity hasn't changed. So when you give government power and technology through technology, and you move government faster than humanity has changed, you give government these powers based on technology, humans are going to corrupt it. Human,
Okay, now if I
humanity,
take that argument,
humanity is the limitation of
okay,
government power.
that argument doesn't hold water, Scott, because if I take that argument, we should go back to living as nomads on
No,
the
didn't say anything
African
about that.
savannah,
Didn't
you
say
know,
anything about that. No.
because all of our technological progress, then you could argue, is somehow bad or
What
correct.
does government have to do with technology?
Government is a technology.
Or what does government have to do with regulating technology? Why is that? Why is that a necessity?
Because in the hands of private individuals, without government to hold private individuals in check, those individuals can cause harm to others. In fact, you go back to the first law code that we have, the Law Code of Hammurabi. And in the Law Code of Hammurabi, Hammurabi literally states that the purpose of his code, or one of the purposes, is to protect the weak from the strong.
Mhm.
Humans have been preying upon other humans forever. Now, I would argue that your idea of negative rights creates a role for government to protect humans from other humans,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, but that's a big job. especially in this day and age, because it is no longer I rob you in the alleyway or I break into your house and steal your tools, because these
Mhm,
are laws that are mentioned in the Law Code of Hammurabi, or
mhm.
my irrigation ditch floods your property, or my ox gores your ox or another person, or I build a house and the house collapses. These are all laws in the Law Code of Hammurabi, ways in which one human can harm another person, such as striking you and putting your eye out, blah, 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 eye for eye.
Right, right, right.
Okay. But in this day and age, with technology, like they can clean out your bank account, they can steal
But it's
your identity.
still,
Uh,
it's still robbery.
they're,
It's still the
correct, correct. So
basic
you
thing of
still
robbery.
right, but the law code is no longer, the law code of Hammurabi, which is like, I don't know, 140 laws or something, if I recall. I can't remember
Mhm.
what it was. I used to know. Now, of course, it has to be thousands, because there's no end to human creativity and the way in which humans can come up with ways to prey upon
Right.
others.
But the problem is, when you this is why they really did not want to have an enumerated list of rights, because the idea is, once you codify something, then you have loopholes. The
Right,
codification
right.
creates the loopholes.
Which is what creates all these laws about chickens and cars in Europe
Yeah,
or whatever,
exactly.
because
So,
somebody found a
just
loophole.
keep it smaller and simpler. Of, was it yours? No. Did you take it? Yeah. Okay. It doesn't matter if you took it through a computer, if you took it through was it yours? No.
Right.
Did you take it? Yeah. It's robbery. Bam. Just take care of that, instead, well, it's robbery if it's this, or if you have this, and the more you codify it, the bigger it gets, the more detailed it gets, the more loopholes you're able to create. Keep it as simple as possible.
What if there's a contract involved? What if the thievery has happened through the means of a contract, and now you are debating the meaning of the words in the contract?
Exactly.
Like
Let's
these
try
debates
to
come
avoid
down
that.
to whether there's a comma, an Oxford comma, even.
Yeah, let's
You
try
know.
to avoid that.
Okay, but you can't avoid it, because it's going to happen in a complex, advanced society. So what do you do then?
You keep
And
it.
that's why you need a government of the size that it is to handle all of these issues.
That's why
I'm with you that
yeah,
I agree with you all day. I'd like it to be as simple as possible. Wouldn't it be great to just take a person who's guilty and drag him up before the magistrate and hang him on the same day? That would be
if it's
fantastic.
a
I think
hanging
a lot
fence.
of people would be happy, right?
If
But
it's a
that's
hanging fence.
right, yeah, assuming so. But that's not where we are as a civilization. As a society, we have decided that there are certain things that we want to grant to each other because we all benefit from it. Social Security being a fantastic and popular example. The
Mhm.
idea that we will each take a portion of our paycheck, we will put it into a pot. Those who need it may draw upon it. Those who can will contribute to it. And then when you get to your age where you can retire, it is there for you and it facilitates your retirement. Now,
Gotcha.
we can gripe
And
about how Social
you guys
Security
move
is
from
run.
wider, please.
What's
Sorry,
that?
I'm having trouble hearing Marshall.
Oh, so we can argue about Social Security and such, but at the end of the day, as a society, we have agreed that this is a rule by which we want to live. And therefore, I find it highly offensive that anybody would say, let's take a hatchet to this. There's no vote involved in hatcheting that. It wasn't part of the platform or anything, but yet we have these guys up there who
There
are
was a vote
taking
involved.
hatchet.
We voted the president in with
Okay,
the
but the
mandate.
president does not have carte blanche. The president is a servant of the people.
Yeah, and
The
the people of
president's job is to enact the will of the people,
and the
often as
president,
expressed
yeah,
through
and the
Congress.
president is only affecting the
Not
things that they have the authority to affect right now. All the
what? Yeah.
regulatory,
Oh,
all the regulatory bodies that fall under the executive.
yeah, and the problem is the president has gone like a bull in a china closet. There are multiple court cases, and of course, he
All right, then we'll
knows as
figure it out
well
in
as
the court.
many people. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
figuring out in the
that's the
court, but at
resistance,
the
and
cost
that's
of what?
fine.
At
Yeah,
the
but
cost of what? And at what delay? And how many people have been harmed in the meantime? And what will we
think
do to make those
less than
people
who are
whole?
currently being harmed by the bureaucracy that we have.
I'm
I
sorry,
want,
what?
I want to bring up. I want to bring up Brett, if I can read this. Okay.
Sure, sure.
He said, what should be simple are the laws add up to cover the multitude of situations. The law is never simple because life is not simple. And I get that. And I think I made it clear that I get that. What I'm saying is resist as much as possible, push back as hard as possible so that growth in government size goes as slow as possible.
Mhm,
So I believe we as citizens Yes, it's going to get complicated, but we should fight that as much as possible so that it doesn't get out of hand. We don't want it to snowball. Slow it down as much as possible and keep government growth as small as possible. And when it's gotten this far out of hand, take an axe to it. Take an axe to it and let's get it down. And then we'll find out, you know what do we actually need? We'll find out quick, and that's fine. And we'll put those things back up. But I believe that the resistance to the size of the government is worthy of rebuilding what we need to if we took too much back. I think it's worth it because we have to slow down government as much as possible because anything that government does is an infringement upon individual liberties. So let's keep that as low as possible to only the minimum to maintain the peaceful society.
Yeah, I disagree. I think some things that government does actually enhance individual liberties, such as like a minimum wage law. You know, what liberty do you have if you're starving to death or if you're working but you're still starving? There's no liberty enjoyed by you. But if you impose a minimum wage law and your employer is required to pay you enough so that you can survive and pay your rent and maybe have a little left over to do something, I see that as advancing your liberty.
And that's great, but you are also limiting the individual liberties of the owners, and that might be justifiable.
Well, the owner probably has plenty of liberties at the rate they're paying.
But you are still limiting their liberty by definition.
But if there's going to be a trade-off, the rich and the powerful should pay so that those who cannot pay can afford to live.
And that's fine. That's a different argument, though. My argument was every act of government is an infringement upon somebody's individual liberty. So let's keep it to the minimum as much as possible.
Okay.
Yep. So there we are. Brett, thank you for sounding off and in there. You can keep the comments going in there, and we appreciate you guys. We'll be back next week. I have no idea what we'll be talking about, but I like that we talk. Marshall, I like that we talk and we have these conversations and that we can have these conversations in this way, and we're not trying to punch each other in the face.
Yeah, I think it's important. Just don't be a Nazi.
Yep. Sounds good. Until next time, this has been United Opposition with Marshall and Scott. Thanks.